Was there, well, okay. I was just going to say, was there something from last week that you wanted to bring up and address for what we're supposed to, I thought maybe there was something that you wanted to talk about as a consideration from what we talked about last time.
Well, a lot of people, you kept saying during the video, can we dive in deep? We can dive in deeper. So a lot of people seem to like the topic. So maybe if we can do that, that'd be great. I don't know if that's what you're doing, though.
Kind of, sort of. This might end up being another one of these 3-week topic. Anyway, why don't you open up with, or somebody with a word of asking for Yahuwah's attention to us.
Okay, thank you, Father, for opportunity to meet together, and bless these words, your words, and may they go far and wide throughout the world. In Yahuwah's name, amen.
Amen to that.
All right, so this is the 25th of September of 2022. And on one calendar, last night was the first day of Sukkot. So some people have never seen a sukkah. So this is one version. A big oak branch fell from the tree, and so we used it as a header piece in front of this room. Put up these curtains, some ribbons, some flowers, sitting out, little camp area out in the lawn. So on another calendar this evening, I'll be with a group of people. This is their Yom Teruah. And a couple days ago, I think it was Wednesday, I was with another group that was their first. No, that was their Yom Teruah. Anyway, just to say, there's these different calendars. A couple weeks ago in Oregon, we were doing Sukkot, camping out in the yard, and had a little setup. So people say, well, how do you do it? So the rabbis have determined that there's a certain protocol that they, you might say, tell their followers what to do. Well, who's following who? So I'm just saying this is one model for people's consideration. It's still not quite finished. We're going to throw some other branches and this and that, but we were doing this yesterday and say, wait a minute, yesterday was Shabbat. Why are we working on this? And it's like, well, he said on the 15th day of the 7th month, that first day of Sukkot, go out and get these branches and stuff and build your sukkah. So what if it's Shabbat? You're not supposed to work. Well, is this work? This isn't servile work. It's not your typical work. So what I'm saying is that these matters might be contentious to some people. So for us to talk about returning to Yahuwah's ways, you can bet there's going to be some contention. One thing we noticed as we were putting this thing together yesterday is that you let your imagination run. It's like some flowers, some ribbons, some hangings, curtains. What else? And it's like, it's the same effort that some people put into decorating their house for Halloween or Christmas or Easter. Only this is what we're told to do. Yahweh said. In fact, I mentioned the word last week that there's a certain word, bow, B-O-W. And there's two ways to spell the word bow. It's Kufshin Tav, or it's Kufshin Tet. They both mean the word bow, or to make something straight or arranged. The word Kufshin Tet is also the word for truth, or to correctly evaluate, appraise, or find some bearing on the truth. And then to adorn yourself, your mind, your family, your tradition with the authentic truth. Well, as other people, namely specifically say Michael Rood and Jim Staley did that talk, Truth or Tradition, and it has to do with, where do we, and Lou Wright wrote the book, Fossilized Customs, and where do we get the cultural tradition? The big three for the United States, you might say, is Christmas, Easter, and Halloween. Where did people come up with those customs? Well, they're amalgamated or blended or absorbed with various, and say the word pagan. Paganism is actually a religion. Heathen is more like no religion. So it's basically heathen and or various other cultural amalgamation, blending together, composite. But it's not true. It's not correct. Yahuwah said specifically to his people, do not learn the ways of the surrounding nations who are not his people, not even concerned with his ways. Don't look at what they do as a custom and say, hey, that's pretty cool. I'm going to do that. It's like Buddhists have prayer flags. And it's like, well, that's a nice idea. You know, make a little thing that hangs on put a series of them hangs on a string and they blow in the wind and each one's a little prayer. And it's like, well, that's not a bad thing to do. But he told me, don't look at what other cultures do and do it like you're worshiping me. And so the people that, you know, the word holy, Holy, comes from the translation of the word kadosh in Hebrew. But there's a goddess of India, of Hindu, I don't know the details, but I do know that when they celebrate, they take colored powders and paints and dyes, and they throw them all over the place. And you look at it on the internet, it's like, wow, hey, that looks kind of fun. That looks like a great way to do things. Maybe we should do that too. And it's like, as much as that might be a nice thing to do, a fun thing to do, a colorful party thing, he said, do not look at the festivities of the Elohim Achrim, the way that people worship other deities, and do it like you're worshiping me. So why do we use a Christmas tree? Why do we have colored Easter eggs? What he said was Deuteronomy 14, Leviticus 23, and a few other places. He said, celebrate the festival of Sukkot for 7 days and have a non-work day on the first day and then on the 8th day. Well, if Sukkot's only 7 days, where does he come up with this 8th day? That's its own festival. It's called Shemini Atzeret. Shemini means 8, or it also means oil, or it also means to assess and appraise. It's a synonym with Eric, Ayin Resh Kaf, as in Erichtology. And it means, think about this and figure out what its value is. And the word Atzer, or Atzeret, means to stop. Don't leave yet. Withhold your, let's go and get, it's like, so a lot of people do Sukkot by whether you sleep in the space, whether you sit in the space, the word is to dwell in the space for 7 days. He didn't say specifically you should sleep there 7 nights. He said dwell for 7 days. So I know some people will set up a tent inside their living room if they have no other space. So they'll put up a little thing on a back porch or out in their yard, camp out. Some people might stay in a motorhome or some people go to a hotel. And it's like, listen, I'm not going to tell you what's right and wrong. What I'm saying is the culture of Yahuwah, the kingdom of heaven, you might say. You remember every time Yeshua said, the kingdom of heaven is like this, and then he'll tell a story, which is kind of like this little parable. This is the culture of that kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, to engage the doing of Sukkot, and it's right now. So when Kurt had the title, Now's the Time, a couple of weeks ago, for what we were talking about, it's saying, hey, this is it. This is the month. This is the period of time in the fall, in the autumn, and regardless of which calendar you're observing, do it with all your heart and all your soul. So the same, you might say, enthusiasm that your family, your culture might have enjoyed throwing powdered colors, dyes around at the Holy Festival or the Christmas Tree Festival or the macabre Dead Saints Festival of Halloween, You could be doing Sukkot. Feast of Trumpets. Like I said, today is what you'd call the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah. Well, the word Teruah doesn't even necessarily mean trumpet. Remember, we talked about a couple weeks ago the word Resh Ayin. That's the word evil, but it's also noise and shout. So Resh Ayin, and it's all about the language. So you put a tav prefix, a hey suffix, and stick a vav in between the resh and the ayin, and you got Teruah. So is Yom Teruah, is that the festival of evil? It's noise and shout is the meaning of the word resh ayin, but it's also to think, to have a thought, a purpose, an intention. It's also friend and companion. And so the whole time talking about saying the word resh ayin, or the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Hua had no concept of evil nor of good. And it wasn't until they were sabotaged, betrayed by the treachery, the evil intent of the Nachash, the serpent, to destroy the composure of his associate. Remember, it said this particular creature, this Nachash, was more Ayin Resh Vav Mem than any of the other creatures. And yet the word Ayin Resh Vav Mem, the exact same word, the last word of Genesis chapter 2, was that Adam and Hua were naked and not ashamed. But that word naked is Ayin Resh Vav Mem. The first verse of chapter 3 of Genesis, the serpent, the Nachash, not serpent, Nachash, Nun Het Shin, was more Ayin Resh Vav Mem, and it's translated there, cunning, clever, shrewd, mental aptitude, you might say, ability to think. And he was communicating, talking somehow. With animals could talk. Some people think they talked to all the animals in the garden, whatever. But it just says there was a relationship of friend, companion, associate, that the Nachash had the intent of sabotaging, betraying Adam and Hua, you might say human benefit, because the word tov, good, welfare, things working the way they're supposed to work. So Resh Ayin is to compromise the way things work. Wasn't it Crosby, Stills and Nash did a song, something about how do we, getting back to the garden. I think they sang that at Woodstock or something. But there's this concept that we have in our mind of, is it possible for humanity to recover some aspects? It'd be great if it was all, but some aspects of what was lost in the Garden of Eden. So if you read that story, Genesis chapter 3, Elohim says, he told him not to take the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and eat it. And in thinking about this story, the Nachash comes up to Eve, they're talking for how many occasions, who knows, but this one conversation is recorded, and he says, "Let him say you could eat of every tree in the garden, didn't he say?" And she says, "Well, all but this one. In fact, we can't even touch it or else we'll die." And the serpent says, "You're not going to die." Was that a lie? Well, now, wait a minute. To get particularly legal about every word and every letter of every word, mentioned once before, this is a total tangent thought here, David Wynn Miller, Parse Syntax Grammar. Whole nother subject. He's not around anymore, but every letter, every word, the structure of every sentence, to establish legal accuracy, validity, if it's not legal format, it's not legal. It doesn't count. It's presumption bearing no basis, and they're not legal. They're not true, and they hold no clout unless in courts of law other people assume the legality and make rulings on that assumption until somebody walks up and says, "Hey, no, wait a minute. This is the legal reality, and therefore every one of your judgments, rulings, statements, ordinances based on non-truth are invalid and void, and you can't You have to allow everybody out of jail. You can't prosecute. You can't perpetrate the void. You can't perpetrate the untruth once the truth has been made known. David Wynn Miller was talking about that a few years back. So anyway, for the Nachash to say, you're not going to die. Well, he's countering Yahweh's words. Well, no, wait a minute. He countered the words that said, don't eat it lest you'll die, but he didn't counter the words that said, if you touch it, you'll die, because Yahuwah never said, if you touch it, you'll die. So now we have to look back and go, what was the legal details? And it's like, oh, come on, you know what he meant, so just stop it. No, wait a minute. There's something about scrutiny here. How do we recover what was lost? So there was actually 12 parts, right? 12 hours, 6 weeks. And then the last one, which was, I called it on the website, parts 13 and 14 of the building a consciousness. What's all that about? If you try to learn every little detail, if you try to learn every law on the books, that's a task. It's a pretty tough task. There was a fellow, I forget his name, who wrote a book called The Inner Game of Music. And he's talking about people, he was a music teacher, and people trying to learn the notes playing a cello, I believe it was. And gosh, they were struggling, and they remembered some, they'd forget. And he said, listen, your conscious mind's getting in the way. Think about something else. Stop reading the music. Close your eyes. Put your mind into this place. Now play it. It's like, no, but I can't. Stop thinking about it. Just let your hand. They played it perfectly. It's like their hands following the track in their brain played it better than when they were thinking. So the conscious mind, the thinking mind, blazes a trail of neural synapses inside the physical matter of your mind. It's just like if you go out into the woods, it's thick brush and tangled sticks and branches. It's like, gosh, I have to get from here to there, maybe go to the stream and get some water. But there's usually an animal trail, whether it's a deer or a rabbit or something. And if you follow that, you push some of the branches, you step things down, and the more you use it, the more it blazes a trail. The more it clears the trail, the more obvious and noticeable the trail is. That's the way neural synapses work in the brain. The more you practice something and do something, it blazes a trail. And they say that they meaning, say scientists who study the physiology of the mind, of the brain, physiological psychology, that field. If you do something and sustain it for 20 minutes, if you think a certain type of thoughts or a behavior, if you practice tennis, hitting it properly, hold your hand exactly right to have that racket hit the ball for 20 minutes, your brain will lock in like pour concrete. It's like, okay, that's now solid. Now it's no longer just this little animal trail that might vary. We've got a paved sidewalk. That's the way we're built. And once we learn that's the way we're built, now instead of just groping and searching in the dark through the tangles, boy, we can find the truth and do it on purpose. So every year you say, it's Sukkot. It's the season of Sukkot. What are we supposed to do? Do something. See what other people are doing. And just do something. Make it your own. And with the same intent or appreciation, some people love Christmas and boy, they go all out. Some people hate it and don't want to do anything. In fact, last year, I know one occasion we were at, there was a minimalist sukkah. It's like, he wants branches on the roof, so we went out and grabbed one branch. When I say we, it's like, yeah, I was there, but one branch and threw it up on top of the deck. And it's like, okay, there's the branches on the roof. What? It's an artistic statement of minimalism. Is that legal? Is that right? Hey, it's just art. How much do you have to do? It's like, that Christmas tradition where you take a little sprig of, mistletoe and hold it overhead. Hey, that's like Sukkot. It's just a piece of a branch of greenery above you. Is that? I'm just saying. Here, am I doing Sukkot now? What does he want from? He said, make Shabbat, a Shah Shabbat. It's like, what does he want me to do on Shabbat? No, you do Shabbat. You cause Shabbat to exist. And these Moedim are Shabbats. So what does it mean to be Israel? What does it mean to be his people? What's the right way to do it? Well, there's 12 tribes. And remember the breastplate, the thing that the high priest wore, where there's 12 stones? Well, each stone was a different color, texture, essence, nuance. Each stone was supposed to transmit light, and each stone was supposed to be, you might say, a perfect or a specimen with integrity. And then there was these two magic stones, the Urim and the Thummim. You know about those? Two magic stones. I heard somebody wrote a whole book. It was like a book on physics. And they're saying, man, if we can find these two stones, we might be able to levitate and fly. What were these Urim and Thummim? And they had some, when I say magic, unknown powers. And were they sorcerer's stones? Some might put them in that category. It's like, well, maybe we can figure out what they are. Maybe they were electromagnetic, positive, negative magnet poles. And the word Tav Mem, Tumim, Urim and Thummim. Tav Mem means perfect, artless, innocent, with integrity. A perfect specimen of what? Well, Thummim is plural, so it's of the 12 stones. So I'm suggesting that there's not two special magic stones, but that these are two character attributes of all 12 stones. The word or, Urim, Aleph, Vav, Resh, Yod, Mem, the word or is light. So somehow, perhaps these stones were supposed to be translucent aspect of being able to allow light to shine through them. I heard somebody once did a study of the 12 stones, and they said, well, some were crystalline and some were, you might say, so dense they were like a solid stone. And it's like, well, then they wouldn't be Urim. So if he's saying these 12 stones should be translucent of some effect to allow light through them and also to be of a perfect integrity, well, then these are two character aspects of each of the 12. And if I appropriate that to the mind of saying there's 12 tribes of Israel, and he did that on purpose, even though Jacob had these 4 women, Jacob didn't intend on having 4 wives or concubines or whatever. He just wanted Rachel. Everything else was, let's just call it monkey business. Jacob was this sneaky little usurper, supplanter, and it was done to him. Oh, well, we've got the 12 tribes, and they're all supposed to be of perfect integrity. When it says artless, Tav Mem, artless, it means don't just come up and do your own thing. Nadab and Abihu, Aaron's 2 sons. It was opening day of the Mishkan. They had just been, Bezalel and Aholiab had just been given all the instructions, and they've built all the articles of the tabernacle. Priest garments, they're all dressed up. Everybody's out there, fire from heaven to come down and light up the altar of incense and the brazen altar out front with the sacrifice on it. And Nadab and Abihu thinks, hey, yeah, and we should bring our little incense burners and come strutting out, swinging these things, like you might see in some sort of, let's just say, a highly ritualed Christian worship event. They had it at the, I know the Orthodox do that, the Catholics do that at Mass. They have these little incense burners, that kind of thing. That's what at least I picture. What Nadab and Abihu were doing exactly, I don't know, but I think it was something like that. But see, that was against the protocol. Yahuwah never said for them to do that. And so fire, whether it was a lightning bolt or whether it was a ball of fire or something, came from heaven and bam, hit them both right there in the middle of the area in the Mishkan and burned them up, killed them right there, the first day, within the first few minutes of the opening ceremony. Yahweh killed them. And then remember, he told Moshe, because you misrepresented me, I told you to speak to the rock. This first time he was told hit the rock when they were thirsty, and he hit the rock with his stick, and out gushed water, and all the people and animals, 3 million people plus herds of animals, all drank. A lot of water came out. The second time that happened later, Moshe was all frustrated and disturbed, and he yelled at the people, and he hit the rock. And Yahweh said, you misrepresented my integrity. You put your own spin, your own art onto it. Therefore, you can't come into the land of Israel. And Moshe pleaded at least 3 times. Oh, come on, would you come on, please? Shut up, I don't want to hear it again. You're going to die. You can look, you can't go in. And then he gave it to Joshua to take the people in the Exodus. And Moshe's last conversation with the people is the book of Deuteronomy. I'm just trying to give some bearing to history. But Sukkot, do put your artistry to it, to the sukkah. In fact, he says, Deuteronomy 14, not everybody has heard this before, but he says, store up your tithe throughout the year. Tithe, your 10% of your income, store it up and spend it for whatever your soul desires, whatever your heart lusts for at Sukkot. This is the party, and he says, I want my people rejoicing for a week. In the fall, at the harvest time, the last half of the 7th month. I never heard that preached. People preach Malachi 3, where he says, bring all the tithes into the storehouse. Storehouse? What does that mean? Did he mean put your money in the bank, and then when Sukkot comes, pull it out and go spend it and use it on whatever you want, anything you want, even strong drink, even foods that you maybe wouldn't eat during the rest of the year? And it's like, if you've got diabetic problems and you eat a bunch of sugar, well, will you pay for it, or will you have some grace for the week where it's like, do whatever you want, and then, hey, well, go ask a rabbi, they'll tell you, or think about it with your friends and just make some decisions. Express your heart and soul at Sukkot. It's like that, I think of it was like that week between Christmas and New Year. You know, you're in college and you get together with your friends and you go skiing. It's the middle of winter, and it's like, whoa, what do we do? It's like, we've saved up some money and school's out and let's go do something. Oh, that's this week of Sukkot. Just saying, do what he said. So when you're building a consciousness, you're getting your mind in tune with his. Remember, it says, let this mind be in you. I think this is in Peter, 2 Peter, I think, which was also in Christ Jesus. You know, that's the King James English quote. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Yahusha, our great role model. What mind? Well, what's the Hebrew word for mind? You see something written in English in King James, you say, gosh, you know, what's the Hebrew word? Well, there's actually 6 different words that could be translated mind. One would be nephesh, one that which animates you. One would be ruach, but that's also wind, like the breeze blowing these ribbons. That's a ruach. There's 6 of them. It's written about in the little booklet called the Shields Project on the erictology.net. You can go read that if you want. I think it starts about page 40, that subject. Let this mind be in you. Let, does that mean you should allow or you should cause? English words. What do you do with that? Well, in Deuteronomy 30, Yahweh said, when all these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse, which I've put before you, then you will return to these words that I'm talking about you today. That today was 1500 BC, approximately. It wasn't the New Testament. It wasn't even Genesis. It's Deuteronomy. He says, read the book of Deuteronomy and then read Deuteronomy 30. And he says, all these things I'm talking about in the future, when everything's played out exactly as prophesied. So does that make it the last days, the end days? or the days at least at the conclusion of seeing the blessing play out, the curse play out. Well, if that's phase 1 and 2, what's phase 3? The end of the world? It doesn't say that. If phase 1 plays out, phase 2 plays out, what's phase 3? We return to these words with all our heart and soul. Well, then what? When's the end of the world? Well, that would have to be phase 4 at least. Or if there's something else, there's going to be a phase 5. So where are we now? Well, we're returning to all these words. So we're at the beginning of phase 3. All these things that come upon you, the blessing and the curse. Well, when was the blessing? King David's era. Moshe was about 1500 BC. King David was, and then his son Solomon following him, was about 1000 or 900 BC. So think of it in 500-year increments. Abraham is about 2000 BC. Then Moshe is about 1500. David was 1000, and then the time of Daniel, which is also right there with Ezra and Ezekiel, that's about 500 BC. And then at 0 AD, 500 years later, that's the time of Yeshua. And here we are 2,000 years from then. So Moshe's back at 1500, and here we are at 2022, let's call it 2,000 years later. And if we're just at the beginning of phase 3, well, what's in front of us? So going back to the prophecies of these tribes, and then we're looking at Genesis 49. And so Jacob, Yaakov, had his name changed to Israel when he was wrestling with the angel, the messenger, remember? Why? Why did his name get changed with Israel? There's a story behind every name. That's a whole nother study. It's part of this study, but to zero in on this track, this Yaakov is wrestling with the angel. Is that the end of his life? No. As a matter of fact, he's at phase 3. He's at the transition of his life. He grew up, learned some things. He ripped off his brother's birthright. He traded for the birthright, but he ripped off the blessing by sneaky lie, distortion, put furry at his mother's provocation. Rebecca's instigation was almost like the Nachash, this sneaky betrayal of the father's intent to bless Esau. That's a whole other part of the story. I'm saying it runs in the family. He put these woolly leathers on his arms, and his father felt like, gosh, it feels like Esau, but the voice is Jacob's. What's up with that? They were twins. One was smooth. Jacob was smooth-skinned. Esau was quite hairy. That plays into the words that are later found in these prophecies. So he's wrestling with this angel, and he says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And the angel touched somewhere around his thigh, whatever it was. He walked with a limp the rest of his life. Why? A reminder. It's like, oh, come on. He crippled him. The angel crippled him for the rest of his life. I mean, can't you just wear Ezekiel, you're supposed to wear as a reminder. Do this as a reminder. Every day, the Sabbath day is a reminder. You got to cripple the guy, impair his mobility. Esau was quite an athlete, a mountain man, a ruffian of the outdoors. So Jacob had that same genetic build, and yet he was crippled. Yahweh's a pretty tough Elohim. He doesn't mess around. Can't take anything for granted with him. The point is, he said, boy, if you will just promise me that you'll bless me, that I can always count on you, I can always come back to you no matter where I go. Just do that. And if I see that plays out, then you'll be my Elohim. What is this some kind of a leverage? We're vying for options in the contract. What's going on? I mean, Jacob even talked about Elohim as being his father's Elohim, not necessarily his. He had to become his. It's like this personal relationship thing takes a lot of registration. It's not like, oh yes, I'm his, I believe, and I'm his bride of Christ. It's like, whoa, gosh, these words get thrown around which don't seem to fit the model handed to us by Bible stories. This takes a lot of maneuvering. This takes a lot of wrestling. This takes a lot of negotiating, at least mentally. So if you look at the prophecies of these 12 tribes, it's an expression. If you build a certain consciousness in agreement with Yahuwah's Torah, instead of contending against him, instead of always trying to maneuver some other little benefit out of him, it's like, just tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it with all my heart and all my soul. That's building a predisposition within yourself. Predisposition. You're saying, okay, I've observed the struggle in the family for all these years, reading the Bible stories, and I see what happens when people betray him, when people contend with him, when people think they're going to pull a fast one on him. It never works out so well. He's always one step ahead. Just do what he said. Well, what did he say? It's Hebrew. It's not Greek, Latin, or English, or Spanish, French, or Russian, Chinese. What did he say? And then what did he mean? Oh gosh, that's what this whole study is about. What did he mean? How do we do it? That's step 3. Phase 3 is how do we do it? Well, is that the end of the matter? No. What's phase 4 and 5? Let's suggest there's at least 5 steps. We got 5 fingers on our hand, and people say, well, everything's this fractal model. There's something to be learned. There's 7 days of the week. There should be 7,000 years of human life on Earth, at least 7,000. Well, they can calculate we're at least at 6,000. Some people say, you idiot, it's been at least 10 or 15. The Egyptians claim to have been around ancient times, 15,000. Some people say 6 million, whatever. The point is, if you look at the genealogical record in the Bible, this guy begat that guy, begat that guy, begat that. You could trace it back 6,000. So if we're at the cusp between 6 and 7,000, we're like at the Friday night approaching Saturday. We're at the Rev Shabbat, looking at the Shabbat. So if the 7th millennium is like the millennium of the Shabbat, well, that's set apart under Yahweh. That's not a normal 6 days of work. So what's in front of us? Oh, he's going to tear us apart. He's that big ferocious tiger who brought his people all the way out here and said, hey, there you got the tribulation. Tribulation, that's right, I told you. Wham! Whoa, that's what's being preached. Is that what he gave us? Is that what he's got in front of us? You think he's going to bring back the language? You think he's going to bring back the consciousness of being his people, his kadoshi, his sacred, set apart, wonderful, dearly beloved? You think he's going to make promises in the Torah, keep them obscured for nearly 3,000 years, bring us back to this place and say, yes, that's so that you'll be better tribulated. I've heard this preached my whole life from the Christian pulpit, various sources of pulpitry. Well, if Jacob says, prove your words to be true and you'll be my Elohim, it's like, well, I've determined that Yahuwah will be my Elohim. And I haven't yet seen a bunch of these words prove to be true, but I'm going to count on it. I'm going to count on these words are absolutely true. That's what it means to have faith. Amunah. You learn what he said, you take it to heart, skilled, practiced, educated, and then you do what you've learned, knowing it's going to work. Looking at the way the universe is built, it's like, why do things seem to function in such a way that you can observe and determine and think that it's a truism? Mathematics, 2 + 2 always equals 4. There could be a universe where 2 + 2 does not equal 4, but in this universe, 2 + 2 equals 4. Why? Because it's built that way. It's also built that when you join 2 hydrogen atoms with 1 oxygen atom, you get water with a certain pressure or heat applied. Because he built it that way. He built the universe in such a way that the human mind can see, can determine, put it all together, index it, determine the law that makes it work that way, and then run counting on that law to work. Hence we have aeronautics. Airplanes fly because that was all been figured out, how to make these wings give lift and propulsion. And so where we are right now is in this, you call it the phase 3, like Jacob, where we say, What did Yahweh say? Well, people told us he said stuff that he didn't say, or that he meant stuff that he didn't mean based on what he said. We got to give that up. Singing praises at Christmas, saying, "O little town of Bethlehem," is the way to show our love to him, believing that Jesus came as a little baby. Somebody was saying just yesterday that the word manger was actually sukkah. Sukkah. Remember, they showed up at the time of the Feast of Tabernacles, not in the middle of winter, and that there was no room in the hotel. Why were they looking at a hotel if they were supposed to stay in a sukkah? But there was no room in the hotel, so they went and stayed in the sukkah, because what I've seen in Israel is people generally don't sleep in the sukkah. You can if you want to, and it's not a bad thing to do, but that's not necessarily what the word meant. The word shuv, shin bet, means to sit or to dwell. And we're sitting in the sukkah. You can sleep in if you want to. It wasn't necessarily a command, but Mary and Joseph and little baby Jesus, he was born in the sukkah? You don't ever hear that story. Gosh. Translations. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, everything's a picture. What does that mean? What are we supposed to do? So you build this consciousness of, what is Yahweh's kingdom? What does it mean to be his people? What does it mean to have a heart for what he said? You have to start there, or all these words mean nothing. If you don't have a heart for keeping Sukkot, then go visit somebody who's at least talking about it, or to have a conversation, or go sit in their sukkah for a few minutes and then get up and leave and go do something else. Don't disparage what you don't understand. How do you get understanding? Book of Proverbs, it says, if anybody lacks wisdom, let him ask of Elohim for wisdom. And with all you're getting of wisdom, get understanding. Get understanding? Is understanding something that has to be built? Something that has to be developed? Well, the word understanding is bina, bet yod nun hey. Bet nun hey is the act of construction, of building. Mem bet nun means structural, construction. How do you something? You have to understand about vertical and horizontal loads and something that won't fall over. So you put these diagonal braces and triangulation and forces, and that's understanding. Understanding is something which is learning how this thing is affecting that thing. Well, that's kind of like mishpat. Mishpat, mem shin pe tet. What goes around comes around. The measure you use is measured to you. If you treat other people this way, then in the great circular effects of the way the cosmos is built, everything you put out is going to come back around. So Yeshua said, love your enemy. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who despitefully use you. Help the widow and orphan. Pour out your heart. And whatever you do with all your zeal, as unto Elohim, not as unto the paycheck. Yeah, you got to earn a paycheck, but it's not necessarily about the paycheck. Even if you don't earn much, do with all your heart, because the essence of with all your heart is also going to come back to you. And I see these things on purpose, and I'm using these words on purpose, looking at some of these prophecies. I'm using these words because they're part of the consciousness. That if you build the consciousness, and then we look at what Yahweh said with his words, then the words will fit into the consciousness. The same way one of the first little game puzzles that you have as a little kid is, at least when we were little kid in the 50s and 60s, you have a block of wood with different shaped holes, maybe a square and a triangle, and then you have these pieces of wood, different colors, and little wooden mallet. And I still remember, I was maybe 2-3 years old. You pick up this and you drop the square peg in the round hole and you try to beat it in. It's like, it won't fit. Give me a bigger hammer, please. I gotta, just kidding. No, the square peg goes in the square hole and the round peg in the round hole. It's only when you get older and you do construction that if it doesn't fit, do you get the bigger hammer and pound it in to make that work. Just kidding, jokes, construction jokes. Anyway, what I'm saying is that that's the way learning this language is. You learn how it works. It's like chemistry. It's like mathematics. It's like construction. And you have to apply your mind with all your heart and all your soul. And if you do, there is a very certain and a very 2 + 2 = 4 type of return that'll come back on you. The word Jacob, Yaakov, Yod, Ayin, Kuf, Bet, literally means the consequence, the reward, the paycheck, that which follows. It's also a picture of the wake following a ship or the footprints behind somebody walking in the sand. And it's like, okay, so does the word Jacob, Kuf, Bet, Yod, Ayin, Kuf, Bet? Well, Kuf is like this hand reaching out. It's almost like the shape of the letter Yod, right? The round part and the straight part. And he grabs the heel of Esau as he's being born. And they're pictures. Everything in Hebrew is a picture many times over, many, many levels. If you work so that you can turn around and grab your paycheck at the end of the week, is the paycheck behind you? No, it's in front of you. If you walk all day and then you come to a campsite, is the campsite in front of you or behind you? Well, the campsite's in front of you. That's why you're walking toward it. But the campsite you come to at the end of the day is after you've walked all day. So that means it's following your footsteps. As your footsteps walk all day and you finally get there, what follows is you get to the campsite. And I'm saying that because as you read in the dictionary, it'll tell you about the footsteps being the meaning of the word Jacob, the meaning of the word dabar, dalet bet resh, which is translated word speech, saying it also is pasture or plague, and it also means that which follows, like pulling a raft behind a ship, or you get to the pasture at the end of your day of function. So the Sabbath day, the Sabbath millennium is what follows all your efforts. And the way we will experience the effect of that Sabbath day, the Moed, the seventh millennium, is based on the efforts we put in before we're there. What efforts? Deuteronomy 30, with all your heart, with all your soul. It's like, gosh, why didn't they tell me this 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Why didn't they tell my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation? You have to understand about the curse, the great 2,730-year curse. We've talked about this numerous times. Leviticus 26. If you guys don't follow and walk in my ways, if you rebel from my ways, if you find my ways to be abhorrent or reprehensible and you're disgusted by my ways, or if you have a casual disregard, whatever, about Yahweh's ways, he said the curse is coming on you. Not only as a natural consequence of your attitude and action, you're bringing it, you're invoking it almost like magnetic attraction to yourself. But he says, but I'm going to call it in. I'm going to call in your enemies and they're going to come in and tear you apart. And the longer you persist in your attitude, it's going to multiply up to 7 times. And it was 1,000 years after Leviticus 26 that Moshe wrote. You get to Ezekiel chapter 4, 1,000 years later. And finally he says, okay, this is the jail sentence, as it were. This is the terms of the curse. For the southern tribe, 40 years. For the northern kingdom, Ephraim, the 10 tribes, 290 years. Ezekiel, lay on your side, point at this picture, a day for a year, 290. Gosh, excuse me, my brain trying to get on track. 390. 360 days, more or less, is a year. 390, it was like 13 months. And he said a day for a year. So the curse is 390 years. But if they don't come back, which they didn't, hence the fabled lost tribes of the house of Israel, lost 10 tribes, we've got 7 times 390, which comes to the total of 2,730. So just so you know, the great moment of the curse manifesting was when Assyria rolled in, though they had I understand, a 13-year siege of the northern kingdom. But they rolled in. Basically, Samaria was lost, the capital city, in 721 BC. So 721 BC, and if the curse ends up being 2,730, 21 from 30, well, that's 9. So it should bring you to 2009. There's no year 0 between -1 BC and +1 AD. So that brings you to 2010. Hence, we get the 2010 number. 2010 would be the end of the curse. Well, I never heard about this until 2004. And you might say, well, these numbers, who comes up with this stuff? It's not even necessarily valid. Well, somebody has to stop and think about this. In 2004, as I was at Sukkot, and they had a bunch of meetings, kind of like ongoing meetings, back to back to back to back to back to back, which is the way some people do it. But anyway, I don't think that's such a great way to do it anymore, but that's the way some people do it. But I remember this one, I came in a little bit late to this one meeting, and I didn't even realize it was going on. And this guy's talking about this 2,730-year curse. It's like, what? And it was actually a few years later, I never heard anybody mention it. It's like, what was that subject that guy was talking about? And I had to hunt it down, and so this is what it is. It's like, oh, God. How come nobody else is talking about this? Well, occasionally you'll hear somebody mention it here or there. Well, remember last week we talked about Dan. What's the prophecy about Dan? Well, Dan is like this sneaky snake of a guy. He sits there like a snake camouflaged in the bushes, and this horse and rider comes by, or somebody having a nice day, and all of a sudden the snake jumps out. Picture a rattlesnake that just bites the heel of the horse, and that's what a horse does. And the guy falls off, and boom, he's on the ground. And it's like, well, if it's a little girl riding a horse, it's like, oh, come on, somebody kill the snake. Dan, he's that kind of a character. That's why his name's not one of the 12 that are written on the doors to get him into the New Jerusalem in the book of Revelation. Dastardly Dan. No, wait a minute, that's just a perspective. What if, you ever hear this phrase, get off your high horse? Well, that's because back in the days, like especially in England and maybe other European countries, anybody that had a horse that was bred to be pretty big, the crown took it. Government seizing your horse. Only the government agents get to ride on big, high horses, and some of them were, 3 times the size of a normal little pony. The government guys always get the big horses. And so there was this phrase I remember hearing as a kid, get off your high horse. It's like, who do you think you are? Some sort of royal, some sort of big shot, some sort of, well, so picture the guy riding the horse is not some little girl having a nice little joyride on the back of her pony, but think of it as the bureaucrats, the order of oppression and tyranny. And they're like armored knights in their grandeur, or like these big hats that, there's certain words they used to wear. I forget the word. Anyway, in England, they had these big giant hats with the feathers and stuff, and they thought they were all that. One of those guys riding this big high horse. And it's like, or maybe he's a knight with his armor. It's like, who's going to take this guy out? You can't shoot him. You can't throw a rock at him. There's nothing we can do about some oppressions. But Yahweh's always got a plan. Oh, our Elohim's always got a sneaky plan that he's going to use on them, and he reserves the tribe of Dan to accomplish it. And like a snake who's camouflaged, Dan's just sitting there. Everybody thinks Dan's nobody, nothing, gone, disappeared. But Dan is just thinking, sitting there looking, shrewd. Just taking his time, And when he sees the opportunity, like the Achilles heel, that horse with that, he can't reach the knight. He can't reach the body of the horse. And there's the horse hoof. You got to be careful of that if you're a snake, but right at the back of the horse's heel. Gotcha. And the guy falls backwards and wham! Of course, the snake can bite the guy on the ground if he wants to. But what I'm saying is that's the picture of Dan. But what does the word Dan means? Dalet Noon or Dalet Yod Noon. Dean, have you ever heard of Bet Din, House of Judgment? It's like, you get into a school with somebody and you go to House of, or if you're playing tennis and the guy's, boy, you have a judge, a referee who's standing, an umpire, looking at that line. It's like, did the ball touch the line or not? His job is to make the legal determination. His job is to make the legal determination. So we talked about how there's a legal determination of 2,730 years. I never heard about it. A bunch of people have never heard about it. But it's Dan's job to sit there 5 minutes. It's Dan's job to just sit there in the shadows, as it were, camouflaged, just sitting thinking. It's like, wait a minute. How does this work? Other people are doing gymnastics. Other people are going hiking to the top of Mount Everest or playing great music or inventing airplanes. And Dan somehow is just sitting here calculating, observing, and he realizes, oh, there's legality set up here. It has nothing to do with the world in so much as that it's Yahuwah's legality. 2,730 years, to be precise. And at the end of that time, when Israel is set free from the incarceration, well, that's just the end. That's just phase 3. That's just, well, now we're ready to start doing something. It's not the end of the world. It's the end of the incarceration. It's the end of the coma. We're waking up. Waking up to what? Build the consciousness. Get in your mind what it means that there's a kingdom of heaven. Get in your mind that the culture of Yahuwah is not just a different color of the same sporting event, different colored uniform of the same event. Oh, it's a whole different thing. And when he gives us these 4 colors in the Mishkan, blue, purple, red, white linen, gold threads, that's the colors right here. The lights, the ribbons, the fabrics. It establishes a mind. It gets us on track with his way of thinking. And then what Dan was able to figure out, apparently, is it's almost a picture of that little stone in Daniel chapter 2. That little stone comes out of nowhere. It's translated stone not cut with human hands, but it hits the feet, hits the toes of that statue, which is the amalgamation, the head of gold Babylon, arms of silver Media Persia, the guts, the innards of bronze Greece, the legs of iron Rome, and then these feet mixed with iron and clay. That almost looks like the era of democracy, like it is right now. The stone hits the feet. The word feet or leg is regal, resh gimel lamed, which also means custom, habit, and tradition. So if we, being the Bet Nun, son of Aleph Bet, our father's desire, coming back with all our heart and soul, doing what he said, and it impacts or conflicts with the traditions, the regal, the custom, habit, and tradition of this, it's a blending of Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome. It's not, it's staged as a sequence, but it's the blending of all of them. Well, that's kind of where we are now, the way of thinking of the world, and it impacts that, and the statue falls down, turns to dust, and that's the end of the world. No, it says it turns to dust, the wind blows it away, never to be even seen of or remembered anymore, and then that stone becomes a mountain. So this is just phase 3. What's phase 4? The stone becomes this mountain which fills the whole earth to the glory of Elohim. And it says, remember that the knowledge of Elohim will cover the earth the way that the water covers the sea. Where are we? Well, we're right at this transition. The transition of what? I'm suggesting, and then we'll take a break here, I'm suggesting that if we read the 12 prophecies, or the prophecies of the 12 tribes, and push them all together as a stringed out thought, instead of this is for you, and this is for you, and this is for you. But it's like looking at the breastplate of the high priest. You got the 12 stone of different lusters. There's 12 concepts, each one fit together, making this whole ornamented piece. So you take the 12 tribes, each one with their different prophecy, and look at them together as this ornamented piece, and it brings us to today. Because as we read about Dan, he will determine the judicial system, and then everything changes. And so we get into, which we talked about last week. Now we're going to jump into a slightly different thing. Next week we can go back over this, but where this goes throws us right into Revelation chapter 5. And then 6 verse 2, Revelation 6 verse 2, which is the white horse of the apocalypse. And that's where we're going in just a moment, part 2.
Okay.